Thank you, Madam Acting Speaker. Despite thousands of young families and retirees moving into the Palmview area in recent years, local residents still don't have access to a bus service. There's no buses to help kids get to school, no buses to get to the doctors and no buses to get to the shops. It simply isn't good enough. The Sunshine Coast is a wonderful place to live, but with the population growth we're experiencing and the consequent increase in high-density housing, adequate public transport is more important than ever. The design of our new estates across the Sunshine Coast is predicated on the provision of adequate public transport services. Local resident and a mum of three, Shirley Scott, told me about the lack of public transport services in Palmview and how it's greatly impacting on her family. She's had to resort to paying for an Uber or a taxi just so she can get her kids to and from school every single day. Shirley's daughter heads back from university at the end of the month, which will mean further travel costs for her on her one-income family. The lack of public transport for Palmview residents is resulting in more cars on the road, placing more and more pressure on our local roads at peak times, especially around our local schools. Families and retirees in Palmview have been very patient and they understand that planning for these services takes time. But we now have thousands of residents living in a master-planned community in the middle of the Sunshine Coast with no public transport whatsoever. And while locals wait, parents are forced to drive their kids to school across the Sunshine Coast, putting even more pressure on the roads around schools that can't cope with the traffic as it is. But it's not just about the young families. There are many retirees who rely on public transport services right across the Sunshine Coast. And when you can't drive and there isn't any public transport, the only option is for retirees to use costly taxis and Uber. The result is retirees who feel trapped, and, Madam Deputy Speaker, it simply isn't good enough. With 17,000 residents expected to call Palmview home in the near future, the area needs public transport and school bus services now. The Minister for Transport and Main Roads has said many times he wants to see more Queenslanders using public transport, and I support that view. But actions speak louder than words. I call on the Minister to put his money where his mouth is and make the provision of bus services in Palmview an immediate priority.
Thank you, Member.